than 0. Why is W of t is greater than 0? Yeah? Yeah. It would be nice if we had negative weight, because then we could probably just float. Yeah? Alpha represents the mortality rate. So it's the rate of decay in numbers. How are individuals going to decay? Think how they're going to disappear, they're going to die. How are they going to die? Through parasites, old age maybe. So different kinds of diseases, either infectious diseases or diseases in the development of organisms, cancers, or predation. And we're assuming that that's constant over time. That's not changing. So that's not a great assumption, but anyway, that's where we always start out with our models. And so we say W of t is greater than 0. I'm also going to say dw dt is greater than 0. When I say dw dt is greater than 0, what am I saying? The weight's always increasing. Is it always increasing in a function like this? Yep, it is. It's approaching this asymptotically. So that may not be a reasonable assumption, but it's not too bad for fish. Yep? No, because it's approaching it asymptotically. So it means dw dt is greater than 0, but it goes to 0 as t goes to infinity. So it means that it's getting flatter and flatter. So that's a mathematical idealization. But you're right. In general, after a while, you couldn't detect any changes, and you say it's equal to 0. But mathematically, it's approaching 0. So this is a mathematical equation. And at some point, we're going to write down an equation for that. Now, here's the tricky one. I'm going to say 1 over w of t, dw dt, is less than 0. So I've said dw dt is greater than 0. But now I'm saying 1 over w of t, dw dt. Sorry, it's not less than 0. d by dt of this. So this means that 1 over w of t, dw of t is decreasing over time. So it means it's always decreasing over time because it's derivative. It's a function of time. Why would that be a reasonable assumption? What does it mean physically or biologically to say that? Well, firstly, what is 1 over w of t dw dt? Huh? Alpha. Yeah, it's equal to it's only equal to alpha at that point, but it's not equal to alpha at another point. So it's only at that point. We want to calculate the point where it's equal to alpha. But what does it mean to say that this function is decreasing over time? Well, firstly, dw dt is the rate of change of your weight. So if you think of yourself as an individual, and I said your dw dt divided by your w of t is decreasing, what would I be saying about you? Let's see. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, your proportional weight change. So your weight change per unit weight. So what is happening to each kilogram of you? Each kilogram of you is going to be growing to something bigger than a kilogram, but over time, that rate of growth is going to decrease. So your proportional weight gain over time. And this makes sense because if your actual weight gain is going to 0, then your proportional weight gain must be also going to 0. But your proportional weight gain when you're young, so you think of a baby who starts out weighing 8 pounds. By the end of a year, how much does it weigh? What does a 1-year-old weigh? I don't know. Anybody got a 1-year-old kid or sister or nephew or niece or grandkid or something? Okay, they say they weigh 16 pounds. So their proportional weight gain over the year has been 100%. However, when they're 12, we wouldn't want their proportional weight gain for 13 to be doubling. Or if it is, we'll put them on the football team. So that makes a lot of sense. So provided this, so we've got this equation here to solve for t star. And this is going to be t star. So we're going to solve this for t star. In order for there to be a solution for positive t, so to solve for t star, we must have that 1 over w0, dw dt evaluated at t equal to 0, must be greater than alpha. So we've got to check. Is 1 over w of t, dw of t greater than alpha? If not, then we can't get a solution. Why can't we get a solution? The reason why we can't get a solution is 1 over w of t, dw of t is decreasing over time. And if it starts less than alpha and it's decreasing, then it can never be equal to alpha. So in order to be equal to alpha, it has to start greater than alpha. Now we also know that 1 over w of t, dw of t goes to 0 as t goes to infinity if it's got a maximum. I'm not going to prove that. That's just intuitive. You can see here that if w of t is going to 0, then its rate of change per unit, its rate of proportional change will also go to 0. So as long as this holds, then we have t star is the solution to the equation 1 over w of t, dw dt equals alpha. And so we're looking for, this is a function of time, this is a function of time, and we express it as a function of time, and then we set it equal to alpha, and we solve, and then the solution is t star. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down a value, a function of w of t that's used in the literature quite extensively. And that is w of t is equal to w of max 1 minus b e to the minus ct cubed. So that means w at 0 is equal to w max times 1 minus b, e to the 0 is 1 cubed. And then you can show the limit as t tends to infinity of w of t goes to W max. Because this, e to the minus ct, goes to 0, and so we've just left with 1 inside there, cubed times W of max. So everybody, and W of t is greater than 0, and more than that, what you can show is that 1 over W of t dW of t is decreasing, and depending on the value of B and the value of C, you can check to make sure this condition holds. If the condition doesn't hold, then you have this situation. In other words, you maximized initially, and the derivative doesn't have to be 0, because this is just decreasing. But if you've got an interior point, that's the maximum, that's where the derivative is 0. So this is called the von Bertalanffy growth function. So that's Bertalanffy, von Bertalanffy. Named after the scientist who first introduced it. And what we're going to do on Thursday when we talk about linear models, we can show that if an individual in one dimension, like its length, or its width, or its height, we've got 3 dimensions. We've got height, width, and thickness. But a fish will say it's got length, thickness, and height. If it grows so that it's an exponential saturation curve, so if this curve saturates exponentially in one dimension, and then in order to get mass or weight, you have to look at 3 dimensions. So if it's saturating exponentially in each dimension, then it can be saturating to the cube of the exponential in 3 dimensions, and that gives you weight. It turns out that if you fit this to data, you can say, I'm going to look at some data. And here's the weight of an individual, and here's the age of an individual. Now in this situation, this is the age at recruitment. Whenever you're working with something like a fishery, so for example, if you're looking at a salmon population in the ocean, the fish will come to the ocean when they're 1 year old. If you look at an anchovy population, or a hake population, or a whiting population, or a sole population, anyone, you say, okay, the individuals come to a feeding ground once they've reached a certain age. The adults may go somewhere else to reproduce. They usually go to an area where they lay their eggs. The eggs hatch as a larval stage, and the larval stage feeds on little planktonic organisms. Then once they get big enough, they migrate to an area where they can start to feed on other fish. So in a lot of these resource populations, like fish populations, individuals come to an area where you fish them. You don't go and fish them in the breeding areas, because they're so small, they're useless. And so they come at a certain age. And when they come at that age, we say that age is time 0, but they're already maybe 1 year old, 2 years old, 10 months old, 3 months old, whatever. And if you go back here, it's almost as though you'll say, here's when the egg was produced. Here's when they sort of hung around somewhere else, and then they came in here. If this curve held throughout the whole life. But usually it's not like that. When they're in the larval stage, they grow at different rates than when they're in the juvenile stage. So typically they'll come here as juveniles, and we might start catching them only when they're a certain size. Now how do we catch fish? So that we only catch them when they're a certain size and above. In an aquaculture facility, we don't have to worry about catching fish, because we can just drain the pond and take them out. However, if it's not an aquacultural facility, if it's something else, for example, some aquaculture is done in the fjords, like a lot of salmon, especially Atlantic salmon, is raised in ocean areas in pens. And they put up barriers, and they have these individuals in pens, and they feed them. And then you can go in and you can try and catch these individuals. You can try and catch them with nets, or you can try and catch them with hooks. If you throw in a hook, if the hook is this big, then you can't catch a tiny little fish that come and nibble around the hook. You can only catch an individual that will swallow the whole hook. So the hook selects for individuals that are only a certain size and bigger. And of course, if it's a huge fish and you use a tiny hook, then the hook might just come out. So it's got to be the right size hook. If you've got a net, then depending on the size of the mesh, if the mesh is this size, then all little fish this size are going to swim through it. You can't catch them. You can only catch fish this size and bigger. Now, of course, it's not always works like that, because if you've got big fish blocking the net, then sometimes they'll trap smaller fish inside. But we have this concept of what is called knife-edge selectivity. Okay. With knife-edge selectivity, we can assume that instead of having a pond, let's say we know this fish live in a certain area. We know that they segregate by age. So this is what we call a cohort. So all the fish born at the same point in time come and feed here, and they swim around. And now what we do is we put down a net, and we start sweeping the net back and forth, but we can only get individuals of a certain size and above. Size is determined by weight. So as we go along this curve and the biomass, every individual along this curve is the same age, and at a certain point we start to catch them. So at a certain point, we can apply some fishing effort, and let's say we're over here, and we apply some fishing effort, so that instead of the population going down here, there's an added mortality rate. This is a mortality rate alpha. So this is declining because over here we have a mortality rate alpha. But if we come at a certain point, and we increase the mortality rate, so there's no longer just alpha, but it's alpha plus v, then we'll start removing individuals at a greater rate, and we'll start taking out biomass. So it's like saying the n dt is equal to minus alpha n for naught less than or equal to t less than or equal to t critical. I'm going to call this t crit. T critical. Now, if I start harvesting them here, then instead of the curve going like that, it might go like that, and then it'll start dropping. So in this case, t critical is earlier than t star. In this case, t critical is greater than t star. I'm not saying when I'm going to start. All I'm saying is that I'm going to come into the population at some point, and I'm going to start harvesting them at some critical time. And if I start harvesting them at some critical time, how much biomass can I expect to get from the cohort? So I write down my model. I say, up to this critical time, the only mortality they're subject to is the natural mortality. After this critical time, minus alpha n minus Vn for t greater than this critical time. I'll say greater than or equal to, and I'll just say less than. So up until this critical time, natural mortality. After this critical time, natural mortality plus harvesting. So this is the harvest. Okay. Can I write down the solution to this equation, these two equations? Who can write down the solution to that, just like that? Anybody? Well, you've got to do it in two steps. You've got to say, okay, this is part 1, this is part 2. Part 1, n of t equals n0 e to the minus alpha t for naught less than or equal to t less than or equal to less than tc, or less than or equal to tc. The point tc itself doesn't matter, because once you hit that point, then you switch on to the new harvesting, and that's just a single point, so it doesn't really come into the integration. Okay, so this means that n at time tc is going to be equal to n0 e to the minus alpha tc. Okay, now the tricky part is 2. Well, it's not so tricky, you just have to think straight. We're going to solve the problem dn dt equals minus alpha plus v times n, because if I take those two terms together, there's a natural mortality rate and a harvest mortality rate. So this is natural, and this is harvest. Everybody happy? Okay, so let me write down the solution to this. This is for t greater than or equal to tc. So that means n at t starts out at time tc. What is the value at time tc? It's just given here, n0 e to the minus alpha tc. And now I start harvesting it. And it's going to decline exponentially, so I'm going to get another exponential term. But now it's declining not just at the rate alpha, but alpha plus v. And it starts declining at time t equal to tc. So it's for times greater than tc. So if I start out at time, so I put t minus tc there, because I'm going for t greater than or equal to tc. So this means when t is equal to tc, this is 0, e to the 0 is 1, and I have ntc is equal to what it should be. But now beyond tc, this becomes positive. And this is the exponential term that takes us down, not at a rate alpha, but at a rate alpha plus v. So you see where that comes from. Okay. So now we've got knife edge selectivity v. Yeah? This is minus alpha n, and this is the natural. And this is minus vn, and this is the harvest. Sorry that my handwriting's so bad. Yeah. Yeah. So the rate of mortality without harvesting, I'm not applying it all the way through. I'm applying it up till this critical time. At this critical time, I now say I've got knife edge selectivity, and I now apply a harvest rate v to the population, and all individuals bigger than a particular size, that is tc units of time after they're recruited, is now subject to the harvesting mortality. They don't get all harvested immediately, but each individual has a probability of now being harvested, just like it has a probability alpha of dying, it has a probability v of being harvested. Yeah.
So is the TC the first time that population has been harvested?
Yeah, it is. But from now on, I'm just continuously harvesting. I'm now continuously extracting. So it's a harvesting model which I'm So we did harvesting models like the logistic model, where I continuously removed individuals. This is not like the logistic model, because the logistic model is both growth and mortality. Then the population can grow, and then it evens out because of environmental carrying capacity. This is just about mortality. The growth in this is the fact that each year I can expect a new crop of individuals R, provided there's some individuals around to breed. And I'm going to make these connections later. So it's like we're looking at different pieces of the puzzle. This piece of the puzzle says, if I have R individuals, and I harvest them in this way, which is I only harvest them once these individuals get to a certain size, and I don't harvest them completely, but I have a harvest term in there where over time I'm taking individuals out of this cohort. So the key to this part of the story is that all individuals are the same age. I'm then going to do some hand waving to say, well, what if all individuals are not the same age? And that comes towards the end of the lesson. But everybody, any questions about where we are so far? Yeah. Up until this point, n of t, the numbers are declining just through natural mortality until the time tc. After the time tc, they're now declining with natural and harvesting. So I'm writing down the solution that takes into account that they just decline naturally until time tc, and then after time tc, they decline both naturally and because of harvesting. And so this combines the solution